Hey there and welcome to Scandal Steep. It's strange to think back on the time I lived with Puffy Combs, aka Diddy, for an entire year. Back then, it was all on the recommendation of Reid. You see, Puffy had this whole situation with Usher, and it drove the young star to some dark places, both emotionally and physically. Usher ended up in the hospital at one point due to the circumstances surrounding his time with Puffy, and I believe that period played a pivotal role in shaping him, though not always for the better. People often ask why I speak so frankly about Usher. It's not a matter of disrespect, but there are layers to the experiences he had under Puffy's influence that the public may not fully grasp. For years, rumors have swirled around Puffy's Flavor Camp, where many young artists, including Usher, were sent to be groomed. And it wasn't just about music. It was a scene that pushed boundaries, both in terms of personal behavior and business dealings. Usher had to adapt to a strange environment, one filled with lavish parties, strange rituals, and intense demands. When people talk about the infamous Diddy tapes or speculate on what might be hidden from public view, it's not far-fetched to believe that there's a lot more to uncover, especially when it comes to Usher's time in that world. Puffy's life has always been surrounded by mystery, and many of his close associates have kept silent about the more bizarre happenings. Fast forward to today, the federal authorities are continuing to investigate Diddy, and his legal troubles seem far from over. We're not just talking about isolated incidents either, there's talk of a deeper, more troubling pattern of behavior. There's a strong chance that the investigation will extend beyond Diddy, potentially implicating others who were part of his inner circle or who attended his infamous parties. Hollywood, as we know, is a place where many things go unsaid, but the law doesn't discriminate when it comes to witnesses or potential accomplices. Attorneys, like Tony Busby, are preparing to file multiple civil suits against Diddy, with evidence that includes some disturbing photos of abuse. It's astonishing to think that in the span of 24 hours, his legal team received 12,000 calls in response to the allegations. It speaks to the sheer number of people who may have been involved or witnessed questionable behavior. Many of these calls could be pranksters or people with no solid information, but filtering through all that noise is revealing a concerning number of credible claims. While these legal challenges unfold, Usher's name keeps surfacing. He's been associated with Puffy for years, and during that time, many have wondered what Usher saw or experienced during his stay in Puffy's world. For instance, Usher himself admitted during an appearance on The Howard Stern Show that he lived with Puffy for about a year when he was a teenager. Sent there by Reid, Usher described Puffy's home as a kind of flavor camp, where one could see things that were, to put it mildly, beyond ordinary. He talked about the wild parties and how, at 13 years old, he was exposed to a lifestyle that no child should have been part of. While he didn't fully understand what was happening around him at the time, it's clear now that those experiences shaped him in ways that go beyond just his music career. But while Usher speaks fondly of his professional growth under Puffy's mentorship, he also made it clear that he would never send his own son to live under similar circumstances. That in itself speaks volumes about the darker side of what went on. There are things that Usher won't talk about directly, but his reluctance to revisit that chapter of his life reveals more than words ever could. Now, let's consider some of Puffy's other close associates, many of whom have remained tight-lipped about their time in his orbit. Hollywood, as well as the music industry, can be incredibly protective of its own. But as more details come to light, it's becoming harder for these high-profile figures to hide from their past. Ashton Kutcher, Jay-Z, and even more distant figures like Howard Stern have been linked to Puffy's parties, and while they may not have been directly involved in any criminal activity, their association with him could raise questions. The implications of these ties go beyond social circles. The authorities are keen to get to the bottom of these cases, and they will want to speak with anyone who was present at Puffy's gatherings. Even those who claim they didn't know what was going on might be called to testify. After all, it's not just about who did what, it's about who was there and what they saw. And this brings us back to Usher. For someone so closely tied to Puffy during the early stages of his career, it's hard to believe that he wouldn't have more to say. Gene Deal, Puffy's former bodyguard, has alluded to the fact that Usher was groomed by both Puffy and Reid. Deal's candid interviews shed some light on the more unsavory aspects of Puffy's lifestyle, and he doesn't shy away from pointing out the ways in which Usher might have been complicit, whether knowingly or unknowingly. In one particularly disturbing interview, Deal recounted an incident involving Usher that still haunts him. He described a situation where Usher, then just a teenager, was exposed to an uncomfortable scenario involving sexual exploitation. He went on to say that, while Usher managed to carve out a successful career, he did so after enduring traumatic experiences. Deal implied that Usher, like many others in the industry, was forced to pay a heavy price to reach the heights of fame. This brings up the question of Usher's own role in perpetuating this cycle. While he may have started as a victim, some argue that he later became a willing participant in the same system that exploited him. For example, Usher's close ties with Justin Bieber have raised eyebrows. There are videos that suggest Bieber, under Usher's guidance, was also introduced to Puffy's world at a young age. The re-emergence of these old clips has caused a stir, particularly one where Diddy is seen in an uncomfortable interaction with Bieber. Many have questioned why Usher would allow Bieber, someone he mentored, to be exposed to that environment. Was it a case of history repeating itself? Did Usher feel like he owed Puffy something, or was he trying to protect his own status within the industry? Either way, the questions remain unanswered, and Usher has stayed largely silent on the matter. At the end of the day, the entertainment industry is rife with stories of abuse, exploitation, and power dynamics that favor the rich and famous. For years, Puffy's behavior has been an open secret, and yet, those in his circle have remained protective of him, either out of fear or loyalty. As more people come forward, the hope is that the truth will finally come to light. For Usher, the dilemma is complicated. He's someone who rose to stardom under Puffy's wing, but he's also someone who has suffered as a result. Whether he will ever speak out about the darker side of his time with Puffy remains to be seen. The industry has a way of silencing those who get too close to the truth, but as these cases develop, there may come a time when even Usher can no longer remain silent.